Oh, Henderson, who's the assistant to young Mr. Grace, the new chairman.
You've all done very well.
I'm writing on behalf of the chairman to express his delight at your new series of Janet and John stories. He's listened to each episode, and in order to show his appreciation, has recommended the BBC commission a TV version of the tale for CBeebies.
I see.
Good, and as it happens...
Not another episode, surely.
Don't call me sir. Janet and John. John and Pauly go carol singing. John is going out carol singing with his friend Pauly. It is very cold. John puts on his duffel coat and woolly hat. John and Pauly crunch up to the drive of the big house and knock on the door. What fun. Mrs. Frontage answers the door. Mrs. Frontage owns a shop in the village with blacked-out windows called Private Shop. John sometimes spends all his pocket money in her shop.
It's outrageous.
Hello, Johnny, says Mrs. Frontage. Hello, Mrs. Frontage, say Pauly and John.
Yeah?
Mrs. Frontage says...
Oh, dear.
Please call me Melanie. Pauly's a big boy for his age, isn't she? Isn't he? She says.
It's the last time I'm taking you with me.
Do you know what a trollop is when you see one? Pauly does. Here John and Pauly sing Hark the Herald Angels. Would you boys like to come in for a special treat, says Mrs. Frontage. Yes, please, say Pauly and John. Mrs. Frontage gets out 2 enormous wobbly pink blancmanges and gives the boys one each.
Yes.
Thank you very much, say John and Pauly. We've never had these before. The next house they come to belongs to Mr. Ruffley. Ding dong goes the bell. Mr. Ruffley is not in. Mrs. Ruffley calls to the boys to come to the back door. Come into the kitchen and sit on the table in the warm, says Mrs. Ruffley. Kind Mrs. Ruffley. The boys sit on the table and sing We Three Kings. Mrs. Ruffley gives them each a shiny 50p piece. It's nearly 8 o'clock and time to go home. John waves goodbye to Pauly. Pauly seems to be going back to see Melanie Frontage for seconds. John goes home to Janet. Did you have a nice time? Asks Janet. John says, yes, Mrs. Frontage let us try out her big pink jelly wobblers. And at number 41, we entertained the present Mrs. Ruffley on the kitchen table while her husband was out. See Janet tap the barometer. Janet is tapping the barometer with John's head. Poor John.